What is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I wanted to do something a bit different. I've been doing a lot of information videos about the 404 Mark II, so I wanted to get away from that today and just do a general sort of beat making tutorial. And I guess this could probably apply to any kind of hip hop based beat making. And yeah, just before we start the video again, this doesn't need to be done on the 404 Mark II. You can do this on any device, even in a DAW, whatever device you're using to make beats. I'm sure these tips can apply. So what I want to show you is 3 different drum patterns, which I think every sort of lo-fi hip-hop artist should know. As I've mentioned already, it's probably going to be beneficial to anyone that makes hip-hop based music. So I've got some chops lined up here, and I've got some drums. The drums are from my Lo-Fi Drums Volume 3 pack, which you can get on SP Vids. There's a link below in the description. If you guys can go and pick that up, that supports me, and then you could follow along with this tutorial as well. So I've got some chops, and I've got a kick and a snare and a hi-hat. I'm just keeping it really simple for this one. So these are the sounds that I've got. So they're in a mute group because you can add mute groups on the 404 Mark II. And then I've got my drums down here, which I've imported from the SD card. And I've slightly pitched up the snare. I've done that plus 287, so up to 118. That's just a spot where I like the sound of what was going on. The hi-hat I've taken down quite considerably there because I wanted to get a much more sort of bigger sound out of it. I tend to find that when you bring the pitch down, it gives it kind of bigger sound. And the kick as well, I've slightly pitched it up, and what I've found with pitching up kicks is that it gives them a cleaner sound. So that's what I've done to the drums, and apart from that, there's no other effects on these at the moment. If I actually go ahead and build the beat, I'll probably add some isolator on a bus for the drums. That's what I usually do, and then some other effect for the samples as well. But for this example, that's the way I've got things set up. And the first one that I'm going to show you is just the flat sort of standard hip-hop beat that you expect when you hear a kind of regular hip-hop track, if that makes sense. So nothing fancy, but what I want to stress about this beat is that it's a good foundation to build basically an infinite amount of variations over. So if you can play this beat and you practice it enough, you'll start finding little pockets to fit in extra kicks, extra snares or whatever, and make your beat sound more interesting. So this kind of just flat beat is like this. So as long as that hi-hat is hitting at the same rate, you can do all sorts of variations and make your beats have a completely different flavor. So one example I'll show you quickly is, so say you just played it straight like this. So that will sound a lot different to what I'm going to do now, but essentially it's the same thing. It's the same rhythm with the hi-hat, it's the same sort of timing. So you can do so many different variations with that sort of basic layout or basic layout to a drum pattern. And then if we layered that on the top of the samples, we can get something that sounds a little bit like this. Quiet floating up, quiet floating up. Okay, so you get the idea of that one. It's a good foundation to have that beat in the repertoire. If you can't play it with your fingers, you can always cheat and resample, or if you've got a DAW, obviously you can draw that pattern out. So that's the first one I wanted to talk about. The second one is very similar, but it's got a lot of swing in it. So you hear this a lot in lo-fi beats, this really kind of swung drum loop, and it adds a lot more flavor to your beat, definitely. I wouldn't use it on every single beat. I think it's nice to have sort of flat sounding beats in there and then these swung ones as well. It can really add a dynamic to, say, if you're putting a load of tracks together for a beat tape, to have these different types of rhythms going on. So this is how a swung one would sound. And to get the grasp of this, you really need to be able to do this pattern with the hi-hat, which is the swung sort of hi-hat pattern. It's really simple to do, but if you're new to the finger drumming world, it may be a little bit more complicated for you guys. So I'll just show you really slowly. I'll just do the hi-hat pattern on pad 15 here, and it goes something like this. So if you can follow along and play that, it's a lot different to a non-swung hi-hat pattern, which would be like this. And here's the swung one again. So there's a nice feel to it, and if we applied that to some kicks and snares, we can get something like this. And then if we layer that over the top of the samples, we get a very, very different sound to that first example which I've shown you. So let's listen to that.
quiet, quiet chord floating on the quiet, quiet chord floating on the quiet, quiet chord floating on the quiet, quiet chord floating on.
So that sounds way different to
Quiet, quiet chord floating on the.
And one more time with the swung style.
Quiet, quiet chord floating on the.
Okay, so definitely experiment with that. If you need help mastering that one, just go back to that bit again where I was just playing the hi-hat on its own and tap along to that, and eventually you will get that. It's a pretty easy one to pick up. Throwing in those variations with the kicks and snare will take a little bit of practice, but you'll get there eventually if you just keep putting in the time with that one. So the last one that I want to show you is this kind of really stripped down drum loop, which I've noticed in a lot of lo-fi songs, particularly that kind of SoundCloud genre, which I really like, the kind of grimy mixtapes. They're the kind of lo-fi which I've always really enjoyed. This beat is a really good place for beginners to start, actually. Probably should have done it first, but it doesn't matter. Hopefully you've watched this far into the video. You don't have to hit anything at the same time, so the kick and the snare and the hi-hat are all completely independent. So in order to learn how to play it, it's just a case of memorizing the sequence, essentially, especially if you're finger drumming. So this is the way it goes. Again, it uses the kick, the snare, and the hi-hat, but they're never played at the same time. So it goes something like this. And if you are struggling to learn that, what you can do is exchange the hi-hat and the snare. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to confirm that. And then you can literally just do this. Now this can actually work really well if you've got enough sort of depth in your samples that you don't need that hi-hat constantly going to pad out the sound. And the great thing about this beat as well is you can add all sorts of crazy swing to it to get a really nice bouncy feel to your beats. So let's say we play that pattern again, and I'll show you that's just really flat. Obviously, like we've talked about the difference between having a flat sounding beat and a swung beat. So this is just really flat. There's literally no swing in that whatsoever. Now if we go ahead and add some swing, we can really get some bounce into this beat. So here's a demonstration of that. And again, if you need to learn that sort of swung rhythm, just follow along to this with your machine, and I'm sure you'll get it soon enough. So I'll just do a really blank swung beat for you here so you can get to grips with it. And again, that compared to just a straight beat or a flat beat, as I've been calling it. And a swung one. So you're just leaving more space after the first kick, basically, to give it that extra sort of bounce. And then you can start adding in little variations like this. So there are 3 different types of drum loops that you can use on your lo-fi beats or your hip-hop beats, and hopefully you guys have learned something from this. I think this is especially useful if you're just starting out, especially with finger drumming. But again, if you are working in a DAW as well, you can definitely just mouse those in with your mouse and just use those examples that I've put in there as a reference, and hopefully it should get you on your way. And like I mentioned, pay close attention to those flat sounding beats and the swung ones. Both can work in hip-hop and lo-fi hip-hop. So it's good to have both those in the arsenal as well. And yeah, finally, don't forget that those drums are from my Lo-Fi Drums Volume 3 pack. If you could go and pick those up, it supports what I do here, giving you these tutorials. So that would be very much appreciated. And that's it for this one, guys. I hope this tutorial was useful. I hope you can apply this to your next project or your next beat. And whatever machine you're using on, keep making beats, and I'll be back with more content very soon. Peace!